Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Kallina, and thank you for joining me. And let's see, I see we're live. Can I get a wave in the chat box to let me know that we were having some difficulty early, that we're live and you can actually hear me? Okay. Wasn't sure there. Thank you so much for that. Hello. I do have my regular headphones. I'd rather not. Great. Awesome. If two things. I love what I do. So I talk really, really fast when I get excited. Yes. So let me know if I talk too fast. Just drop me a line. Wendy, you are, road runnering it. And if I need to put on my headset for clarity, I'll do that too. Okay, great. I'm excited to be here. What I want to talk about is I want to have a very casual conversation. I've tried to set this up casual. Conversation about data communication and health analytics, because I think this is very, very interesting. I am a professor at Agnes Scott, and I work with data visualization, data analysis, and communication assessment. And one of the things that we're doing is we're putting a new master's in counseling on in place. Yay! Because there is such a need now for mental health counselors, and because something has happened over the last year and a half that is absolutely fascinating to me, and I hope it's fascinating to you. And that is, you can connect very easily with a physician or a mental health counselor online. How many of you have had a telehealth? I'm not doing a poll, just kind of give me an idea. How many of you have had a telehealth appointment in the last year? Has anybody used it? Or is it just me? I'm old. Anybody visited their doctor online? Previously, insurance wouldn't cover it. It's kind of almost sketchy, right? I mean, it was something like 50% of our family appointments. Yes, but it felt kind of sketchy. Maybe the number was not right, but now it's a really big thing. Yeah. And so we've got some interesting things going on with communication. The other thing that I saw, and this has happened, is just this past week on my chart, I received the notification that I would be getting my test at the same time that my doctors would. Well, that's fine. I want information as soon as I can get it. But that's also interesting because it's without context. So I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the increased visualizations. I'm looking at the effort at transparency. I'm looking at what's going on in the public health sphere, and it's almost too much. I just don't have enough hours in the day to put it all together. So want to have this conversation with you and think about it, and introduce and maybe tweak your thinking a little bit about the things that keep me awake at night with this. It's not so much that I think I'm going to be misdiagnosed, or I think that we should move away from that. I think it's wonderful. I think that if we can get Wi-Fi working in rural areas, then that opens up so much in terms of access to healthcare. I just am looking as a data person at some of the things that are going on with visualization, with analysis, and where we'll be going in the future. So let me just pop up a very, very quick history lesson. Some of this you may already know, and give you an idea of where my mind's going. Okay, so let's see. Okay. Are we seeing the slideshow? Let me arrange everything. So many platforms. Whoops. Okay. Do we have a slideshow here? It looks like we do, but I just want to make sure. So I'll wait. I didn't know if this was an interesting title and would draw people in, but I know that this is something that I'm seeing myself do a lot in terms of even in the doctor's office. Um, I'm looking things up. So I thought this was interesting. Yeah, let me Google that. But I have a couple of stories. So here we go. First of all, I want to talk about Jon Snow. Now, I don't want to talk about Jon Snow with the great hair on Game of Thrones. That's a different Jon Snow. But remember Jon Snow. Some of you may be very familiar, especially if you're coming from a public health or an epidemiology background, about cholera and the Broad Street pump. Maybe you're in England, or maybe you've been to England and you've visited this replica, because it's very, very interesting. In the top corner, what you're seeing is kind of the original map that Jon Snow drew. But what he did is basically, through this visualization and looking at the people who had become ill with cholera, he isolated where, as you can see on the diagram, the blue dots were, and figured out that cholera was being transmitted through this water supply, which was actually not a fresh water supply. Now, for those of you who are Walking Dead fans, seems like it was several seasons ago that we had a similar storyline, if y'all will recall. I don't know, with the Whisperers, doing a freshwater switch. So I thought that was kind of an interesting. That was not a new story. It was obviously inspired by the Broad Street pump. Public health piece, but basically through a data visualization, looked, isolated, found out that there was a problem, and removed the handle. Boom. Couldn't get water, cholera solved, right? Well, not solved, but this source of it was removed. So just your little quick data visualization, and how easy, what an easy story, right? Then we have Florence Nightingale. And if you are, again, a student of data visualization, you may be familiar with this Nightingale rose, which you're looking at the left side of the screen. What this is her diagram. Now, looking at the diagram, these are British soldiers. These are soldiers in the Crimean War. If you look at the right side and going from the top, my reading glasses, on the top where it says July, right under where it says April 1854, and working yourself around, you'll see that it's July, August, September. And this is a year. Okay, this is a year. And then that line going to the place on the left, the little diagram on the left, picks up with April 1855. So it's just moving. And the second point, what you've got is you've got deaths, and she's got a key here. The blue is from diseases that are preventable. The black is the boundary from other things that are not related. And the red are from wounds. The red are actual things that happened in deaths in the war. And so what you're seeing is a huge number of casualties. The majority of casualties were actually because of preventable things. So once they implemented hygiene measures, right, then you can see in the left, the blue started decreasing dramatically as soldiers stopped dying from lack of sanitation, lack of just infection. It would have been post-secondary infection is what we would call it. Then Semmelweis. How many of you know about Semmelweis? Anybody? And maternal mortality. Oh, yes. Yes. That's awesome. Online medical access. Yes. Mm. Wash your hands, sing the birthday song, right? The thing about Semmelweis, and this is kind of interesting, and yes, the doctors and midwives story. Semmelweis noted that you had a maternal clinic and that mortality was much higher among the patients who had medical students attend them versus midwives deliver their babies. And he wrote about this, and oh my Lord, this is the table. Tables and tables and tables and tables and tables, right? Absolutely no data visualization. Whereas if he had noticed, or if he had done a simple graph, you can see the difference in mortality rates between the red line, which would have been the medical students, and the blue line, which was the midwives. He stumbled upon this when a friend who was a professor was conducting an autopsy clinic with the medical students. So, the medical students are working with cadavers, and the his friend, the professor, was yep. Ooh, yes. Up to their armpits and cadavers. That was a little much. But yeah, that's the idea. His friend was cut by a student's scalpel and died of symptoms that were very similar to what women were dying post childbirth. And so he put it all together and said, boom, let's start washing hands in lime. Let's start washing your hands. Yes. So did that work? Was that immediately adopted? Anybody know that rest of that story? The Semmelweis effect? So he was a hand washing guy, and he was up to his armpits in cadavers. Ooh, and he had his friend die. That's what helped him put two and two together. But do you know what the Semmelweis effect is? Without Googling. Well, I'll wait to see if anybody types in. We could look at this and say, if you're a student of the data not clear, so not implemented. Yes. The data weren't clear, so it wasn't implemented. That's the take-home message to data visualization, people. Absolutely. And so I could talk about this for hours because this is part of what I do, the importance of data visualization and communication. If he had just had a good chart, right? But it was really more than that. He was saying something that was wildly unpopular. Okay. The interesting thing, and if you read Thomas Kuhn, you go back and you look at how paradigms shift and how our beliefs shift and how history is created and done. When we look at a book, whatever kind of history, if it's public health history, if it's war history, whatever history, the nature of humans is that we want to make it a story. And if we're writing a textbook, we want to make it a coherent story. We tell coherent stories about our surroundings. We tell coherent stories about ourselves. It has to make sense. So when we tell these stories, here are our data visualization people, and they created these visualizations and it went forward, or it didn't in Semmelweis's case. And, we can look back and say, well, yeah, it was data visualization because it was so widely accepted. People were falling all over themselves for Florence Nightingale, or people were doing this. But it's a little bit more than communication. And so I am hesitant in some ways when I hear that if we can just tell a better story, we can get compliance. If we can just give a better graph, if we can just collect better data, I'm a little bit skeptical on that, because it's the same idea as if we could just collect all the variables, we could predict human behavior, which is, behaviorism. And then we could get into that philosophical discussion of free will, which we're not. But we've really, once again, put that on the somehow that we just need to do better data. Now we do, and we need to do better communication. So how do you feel about our data visualization pioneers, or how the data were used? I mean, we had a pump removed, we had hand washing, and eventually we got, Semmelweis's implemented. But the heroes, putting them up, I mean, we're looking at them and they're not villainized here. And history may mention a little bit that they're villainized, but probably at the time, it was not an easy road for them to take. So it's something to think about, the nature of paradigm shifts and the nature of change when we are introducing data and findings. Okay, you're going, wait a minute. Bear with me, because we're building on this. So I already had, because of the online medical, you're able to work with your mother's oncologist. Yes. They hadn't noticed the trend. So how many of you use Google to supplement your knowledge? I already have a yay. Maybe I should ask, who hasn't used Google to supplement their knowledge? Is this a shameful thing to do? It's a shameful thing. Oh, no. Yeah, sure you have. All the time. All the time. How many of you have worked yourself into a frenzy over something you found and were convinced that you had it after spending a little bit too much time? Not shameful. How many of you have diagnosed yourself? When not that severe, it's not a big deal, right? You Google it, you do it, there's information. Everybody here is a data person. So it's not it's shameful. Thank you for the caps. Shameful, according to doctors. So let's think about, hold that for a second. Is it shameful? Don't go to Google, right? We used to say, don't go to Wikipedia when I first became a professor. And well, we don't say that anymore. But now it's like, don't go to Google. You can work yourself into somewhat of a frenzy if you hit the right thing. The joke is everything leads to something terminal or cancer on Google. But let me tell you a story about what happened to me. Oh, goodness. Sorry. I need to sneeze here. So I was part several years ago of one of these leadership, I want to say thingamabobs. How do you like that? One of these leadership year-long things in higher ed. And we had to do a project. And now my terminal degree is developmental psychology, but I have a master's in administration, business administration, and I have a master's in social service administration. I have a master's in information systems and a graduate certificate in data mining. So kind of an interesting mix here. I like a lot of things, but I'm in this group and we have a project, and somebody found a 3-minute video on YouTube about growth mindset. This is not a new idea. Carol Dweck has been around a long time. New ideas get, put all the time, recycled. The whole idea, of course, is that in terms of implementing a growth mindset, is that we shouldn't look at our failures as failures. We should look at them as opportunities to grow, to learn, to move forward. It can be very, very hard. Nobody likes to fail. And the way that we talk about our failures, or the way we talk about failure, the way we talk about not being successful, the way we talk about getting closer to a goal, but not quite there. However, we do this, affects especially students, and that we can really, nip interest in the bud or really discourage students. If we are negative, as in you can't learn, you can't do this. I don't know how many of you, I was terrible at math in high school and got to college, and whoa, all of a sudden, I could do math. Fancy that. Very interesting things going on with the growth mindset. So I liked the growth mindset in terms of that's what my group wanted to do. But what they wanted to do is they wanted to go into what I would call a vulnerable population. These are students who have come from disadvantaged backgrounds, who are academically disadvantaged, who are in a developmental program in a technical school, right? So they're playing catch up. This is a population that, you think of as often a population of 10,000 failures. They failed academically, oftentimes, again, disadvantaged backgrounds. And a lot of it is if you would just try harder, right? If you would just try harder, which is putting it on the student. If you would just try harder, it's hard to try when you're working 2 jobs. If you're hungry, you're sleep deprived, you're taking care of siblings, that entire piece. Just bear with me for a minute. So I bring this up and I said, I appreciate the growth mindset, but I suggest that instead of targeting the students and saying to you, if you would just have a growth mindset, you could do better, which is, again, putting that back on the student. If you would just have a growth mindset, right? That doesn't make sense. If you will talk to the teachers about how to discuss failing tests, how to discuss not progressing, how to discuss how to access tutors without shame. If you will discuss this with the instructors, then you can facilitate a growth mindset among the students. The student is not the target, right? The student is not your unit of analysis, if you will. That's not who you're doing. Well, then I was told, and very loudly by one of the participants in the group, if you would just watch the video, Wendy. Google. I watched the video. Right? I teach conflict resolution too. I watched the video, 3 minutes. I watched it and I thought, I'm dying every minute, right? And I came back and I said, I appreciate that, but believe it or not, in a group of 6 education, 3-minute video beat out my PhD. Needless to say, I said I can't do this ethically. I feel problem with this, and I left the group and actually did not participate in it. I was on that other side. And I just, obviously, it's not a bone to pick. It's just, to me, that information was harmful in terms of it was taken by a group of people who should have known better and used. Got a thought? let me be clear. I'm not shaming my colleagues. It was just a source of stress. So how does that feel? For Google. I worked on an OB floor. It's funny that you're and was a childbirth educator and lactation consultant. So yes, I absolutely hear and worked with midwives. So it's very interesting that you're bringing that. I absolutely hear you. So I've got a graphic up here. And this is how it can feel. Right? This is how it felt to me. And this is kind of what we've got going on. Maybe I should put Facebook, not just Dr. Google, or any other social media, Twitter, whatever, Parlor, whatever. In terms of the idea that people are going outside of the medical communication or the health communication, or in my case, that happened to be an area of, if not expertise, at least I understood in terms of development as a psychologist. So this is a very, very strange thing. Now, this is not a new thing. Okay. Obviously, if you have been watching the news and they talk about, the pandemic Spanish flu, you see many of the parallels, and printed pieces were distributed, flyers were distributed. So it's not that the internet has brought in something that allows people to exchange information that wasn't done before. It's just faster, quicker, more in depth, more information. And it's it's pervasive. I mean, many people have access to a computer or a smartphone. So let's talk a little bit about why we're making the decisions. I'm setting this up for the end so that we can, so be prepared to type, please, to think about the biases. When we are looking at data, we're using data to make decisions. As data people, we like to think, here are the data, and we've isolated the options, and here are the decisions. And again, as I said, history is sanitized to do that. Okay. History is sanitized to make that look very linear. Okay. But if you've heard me talk, and if you saw me, I think 2 conferences ago, talk about bias, one of the things that we do is we have rules. We have to know how to make decisions quickly. We can't decide to make decisions. We make so many decisions, whether, every day, that we have to be able to screen things and make decisions without having to ponder every one. So we develop decision rules, right? So it's not just data. Data are not a direct decision. Data have to go through people's brains. And you're going, of course they have to go through people's brains, right? But we tend to not give this enough weight if the brains aren't data brains. I don't know if that's a quote. If they're not data brains, right? The cognitive bias kicks in there and starts working, with the data. And the thing about a bias or a rule is that it can be conscious, unconscious, but it affects our decision. Okay. So here we are. So we're sitting back. Okay. And I'm sitting, you can see I'm rocking my chair. Most of you have probably spent hours, months, years, decades, quarter centuries here, right? I've been doing this for over 30 years. thinking about data, how to analyze data, right? What do data mean? How to interpret data, thinking data, talking data. Your friends may do data. You work with data. You go to school for data. I mean, you probably have, I'm looking at a bookshelf. I have a bookshelf full of data stuff. Data are my life. It's fun. It's exciting. I clean data for stress relief, right? I mean, this is what we do. This is our expertise, right? So pay attention to us when we say things, when we build models. Pay attention to us when our institutions say things. Pay attention to us when we are, let's bring it down, when we are presenting our data models that we have carefully spent hours on, right? Pay attention, listen, right? Because we all know, I love this slide. I created this slide, but I still love it. You know, we have to gather, analyze, communicate, and use. That is just like to leverage it. You know, we hear this so much and see this so much, and it's so ingrained in us. But have you ever been really Dr. Google's patient? And when I say that, I say, sit back and think for a minute. I ask you if you supplemented, right? Maybe you have health insurance. As graduate students, many moons ago, we went almost 10 years, I think, without health insurance. And that's a pretty scary thing to think about these days. But have you ever been Dr. Google's patient? Have you ever, I think I saw an earlier comment that if it's not severe, yes. Erica said, if it wasn't severe, yes, I can be Dr. Google's patient. I can be Dr. Google's patient if it's not severe. And how do you know if it's severe? Now, I have 3 children. It's not severe if there's no blood, no teeth are on the ground, right? Well, they're grown now. But how would you determine severity? How would you determine this? How are you determining from a medical perspective, if I have any physicians, let's see what I got here. Doctors will try to, yes, when we mention research, yes, and we can't believe everything we see on the computer. Amen. But most research and new revelations are distributed on the internet. Okay. Do I have another? Because I'm about to get down to your very last questions. And that is this. Let me Google that. Let me check it on YouTube. Let me double check it. This is your take home as a data science person. This is your take home as a data scientist. And if this is repetitive and you are learning this in your data science program and you're talking about it ad nauseum, bravo. If you've learned it and have gotten so involved in the analysis, it happens, then let's review it. If you are yelling at the television these days, or you are throwing your hands up when you read the news as you're watching different things, and the way that public health information is put out there, just bear with me for a minute. I've just, right off the top of my head, here are 12 steps to communicating things. Don't cite, they just recommend tools to ease. Never look at shoulder pain. Yep. It's the service we patients get. I agree. It's absolutely, there are Yes, diagnosis is hard. So I'm going to switch. Well, I'm not going to switch. I'm going to ask you to think about this, and then I want you to think about doctors. When we are, as data scientists, flip over to data scientists, when we are data scientists and we are looking at a problem or an issue, we typically don't go in there cold, right? And actually, this is kind of interesting. The problem's not Google or Facebook or any platform. What do we think before? So we have an idea before we start building models. We have to. We can't just build a model without some type. It doesn't necessarily have to be a theory, but we have to have a starting place, right? What data did we collect? Now, I would throw this out to the shoulder issue. One of the things about data collection is we spend a lot of time analyzing data, and I don't know that we spend the time collecting the data that we should. And as I'm sitting here thinking about your shoulder issue, what data did we collect? Your shoulder hurts, maybe rotator cuff, take some painkillers, do some physical therapy. You're going to be fine. What data was collected? The data that was collected was, in that case, symptoms, right? It wasn't anything so much about the root cause. And that can be very, very frustrating as a patient. Now, as a data scientist, are we ever guilty of that? Are we ever guilty of collecting the wrong data? Have you ever collected the wrong data? Yeah, I think we get the bad data in and bad data out, but I'm even talking about good data. Good data. Let me just give you a relevant data issue. Absolutely. How about if we're not talking about, okay, let me just give you an example that we're thinking about this. First of all, yeah, it's tempting that, especially with electronic, the more data, it's easy to collect data. I'm just going to type in something for SurveyMonkey, and it's just as easy for me to ask 50 questions as it is one question. So I'm going to do 50. Absolutely. Get rid of it. Don't need it. However, when I think about what data did we collect and what did we think before, I'm thinking about this as how we view what we do and how we're thinking in absolutes. Let me go back to thinking about, again, we're looking at the linear nature and thinking that these are easy stories. And I would challenge you that no, they're not easy stories. We're missing all the other pieces of it. But when we're talking about what data we collect, how do we clean it and create our variables? How many times have you agonized lately over your variable creation? How many times have you agonized lately over, let's just something easy as age? When's the last time you agonized over a categorical age? Have you ever agonized over a categorical grouping of age? Just curious. And if you have, why? Are you thinking, oh my God, Wendy, if that's what keeps you up at night, Lord, Nightmare on Elm Street's nothing. You're agonizing over the categorical creation of age. How do you decide? How do you decide what groups to use? Yep. Kara, that's one of my students. Sorry. I see it. That's a little wink that she gave me. Why do you agonize, or do you agonize over age? Anybody? Yeah, it's another complex question, but I'm really not trying to get at I think I'm asking you to think I think holistically, if you look down the list, as far as this is the okay, let me step back some. This is much more difficult to do with trying to watch this than having your verbal input. So, if you're looking at these 12 steps, if you're looking at these that are just this is how we do data and this is how we do science. Is there anything about these 12 steps that you look at and go, oh my God, no, this is not what we do. This is not about data. This looks, this does not ring true. This is not what we do. This is not the nature of science. This is not the nature of paradigms. This is not the nature of, this is not what we do. This is not data science. I don't know why she's presenting. This is not what we do. Or do these 12 steps go, yeah, we start with something, we go through it, we do our analysis, we, toss it over the fence to the other, our peers. It's all about the data. Yeah, I mean, this is what we do, right? This is what we do. How many of your non-data friends want to hear about what you do? How many of you could put this 12-point piece, just these 12 easy questions versus literally the first link, which you already think. This is where we get to the problem of communication. I suspect that from when I'm telling the stories of either, my interaction with my peers or John White, Florence Nightingale, Semmelweis, any of these don't feel uncomfortable to you. These probably feel familiar. You've probably had a robust debate or two. If you're a PhD and you're a graduate student, you absolutely have had a robust debate or two because that's the very nature of what we do. We defend our dissertation, we defend our proposals, we have a peer review. This is our world. This is how we talk. We are accustomed to question one. What do we think before? And question 12. What do we think now? Couldn't crowdsourcing help refine the questions and the answers? Sure. Who are you crowdsourcing? This is the issue. When we're looking at this, what we do is, we hear a lot about echo chambers and how people are not paying attention to science or anti-science, and they're preferring Google. And why are they doing this? We do the same behaviors. We're doing these behaviors. We're checking Google. We're making sure, okay, if it's not severe, I got bitten by a cat. Do I need to do something? Punctured my skin. Do I need to do something? Well, yeah, you do. Actually, cat bites are nastier than dog bites. Who knew? Well, I did once I Googled it. Probably no one on here is going to go, oh my God, Wendy, I can't believe you Googled that and worked on that. This is the way we operate. This is the way we think. And what we're making the assumption when we're communicating is that other people are thinking like this, and that people are comfortable with thinking like this. People are comfortable with considering this is what we know yesterday, this is what we know tomorrow. It's almost like the old quote in the first Men in Black, you know, you didn't think aliens, just think about what you'll know tomorrow. When we're talking about communicating health, and doctors and I'm going to flip this off for a minute. What happens is we've got individuals who are experts, but they're experts like many of you because they've gone through these years of education and they've gone through this process. You are comfortable questioning your shoulder. You're comfortable questioning breathing in childbirth. You're comfortable questioning these things because you can go to the literature. You can read the literature. You can look at it. You can assess the sources. You've got those skills. You've got those research skills. Whereas now there's a proliferation. Yes, there's a proliferation of data being produced by non-medical professionals for non-medical professionals. Here's my question to you. When we're looking at health communication, you've got all of this, and right now there are myriad websites out there dealing with, say, COVID. Here's the question that I presented to my students. If you are a 67-year-old diabetic woman in South Georgia who is trying to decide whether or not to open up her care or her daycare, in-home daycare for children 5 and under, assessing her risk, where does she go for that? Where does she go for that? "67-year-old woman, diabetic, living in South Georgia," which is probably rural, has an in-home daycare, children 5 and under. How does she make that decision? So she clicks over, say, the Georgia website showing the COVID rates for her county. You know, even manages to drill down to that, right? What does that tell you? It tells you whether or not COVID rates are increasing or decreasing. We're very, very bad at assessing our own risk. Very bad at assessing our own risk. If you don't think so, think about the way we eat, the way we watch our weight. I mean, that's just, we're very bad at assessing personal risk. Okay. We have different ways of assessing risk for others and risk for ourselves. It's a whole different ballgame. But when we're looking at the health communication piece, what in the world, where does she go? She go to CDC for information on what to do. And what is she going to find? Hello, Teddy. What is she going to find? She's going to find a graph, right? Everybody has seen this graph. It's going to be a bar graph. And it's going to have a moving average, right? A smooth trend line of some sort. And she's got, let's say she's got an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. Ask the people that you know that don't work in data, what does that trend line mean and how is it derived? And why is there a difference, or is there a difference between that moving average that has been derived at 3, 7, or 14 days? We are absolutely missing information hubs. So what fills that gap? Dr. Google? Social media? And the thing is it's conversation and it's content that is jargon-free, that has explanations. Even if you look at the websites, they're not for individual. I can't assess my risk based on that. I can look at the risk for my area. I maybe can look at ICU beds, but that's not going to give me much information about me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a website, or I'm going to go to a video that speaks to me personally, right? Maybe has someone that looks like me, someone who has a daycare, right? Someone who I can identify with that can give me the information. And you're going, well, my God, Wendy, this is a data science conference. How in the world can you equate those two? She is clearly wrong. Well, here's the problem. One of the things that we don't really talk about in data science is the way that people process information. We're thinking, I don't want to use the word ignorant because that's not quite what I mean. If you're in data science, you have a preference. Let me tell you, there's no doubt you have a preference for the way that you look at information. You have a preference, that bias, that little, those red spots. It is a preference for how you think of things. When you are looking at Google, you are looking at it very, very differently from someone who doesn't have that data science background. You just are. It's not wrong. It's not right. It's just your filter. Okay. We all have filters and biases. And so what happens is you're looking at this and you're comfortable with the scientific method. You're comfortable with things changing. But if you're not schooled in that and you're not comfortable with that, and you haven't understood that paradigm shift, that history is not just this linear piece, that everything went so well, right? Maybe Hamilton shook that up, the play, that it wasn't quite so clean as it seemed. But if you're not aware of your history and you're not aware of that, then it's not, again, that you're wrong. It's just you have a different set of filters that you're looking at information through. So what we see as information that's being built on and changed daily, right? Sometimes it feels hourly. You probably have a really good comfort level for, or at least a tolerance for, that ambiguity. But that ambiguity for some people is going to feel very, very uncomfortable. It's not that they're wrong. It's a different way of looking at things. Probably, if you're gathering information, you may go to an expert, you may go to your doctor, you may go to a specialist, you may actually go to the body of literature, right? I know I do. I go to see who's a specialist in the field, and I, scroll through and open another window for things that I don't understand, the vocabulary, and sometimes still don't understand it after I read it, jargon, right? But I don't feel like something is being hidden from me with the jargon. I recognize that it's a disciplinary piece because I work in the world of research and academia. It doesn't feel problematic to me. But if that's not the way that you have been socialized, it's not right. I mean, my children are children of two academics. If that's not the way you've been socialized, if that's not the way your knowledge base is, if that's not the way you've learned, right, then you're looking at it through very, very different filters. And when we're communicating this stuff out, it feels wishy-washy, it feels jargony. And if it's jargony, there obviously is something being hidden. The data visualizations, even what we think of bar charts, are not clear. Go back and read some of the things. Things for health communication should be put out on a 5th grade level, and they're not. Have you looked at something that's written on a 5th grade level lately? We are very guilty in terms of data science in looking at all the variables. We are very, very bad at stepping back after we develop expertise. Not only are we bad at it, it's difficult to cognitively. And that's okay, because that's how expertise is. The closer you become, the more conferences you attend, the longer you work in these fields, the harder it's going to be for you to step back and remember what it felt like the first time you saw a correlation and went, wait a minute. If they both go up, it's a positive correlation, and they both go down, it's a positive correlation? Wait, they both go down, it's a positive correlation. That's not a negative correlation. Remember this? No, if they go this way, it's a negative correlation. Okay? That is one of the hardest things that you see in an intro stat class. Up, down, this is a negative. Positive, positive, right? You forget this. And data scientists forget this. And we become enamored. Of course we do. We love what we do. I don't know many data scientists that don't love what they do. We don't stay in it because it's such an intensive field. We love what we do. We want to share what we do. And we share it in jargon. We share it in complex visualizations. We share it in all these different ways. And yet our doctors do the same thing to us, right? Our physicians do, because they've been socialized too. They've had just as much education as we have, not more, depending on where you are in that educational spectrum. So when we look at all this, is it really no surprise that we are seeing more and more websites and more places and more confusion in terms of the data that we're putting out? So I said I would start this with the things that are keeping me awake at night. The things that keep me awake at night is I'm not sure that we're really looking at what we are doing sometimes. I'm not sure that we're really looking at the data collection like we are considering what we're doing. We talk about the ethics of data collection, and we talk about you can't run analyses on data that you don't have. And the problems of the past are in the data because those are the ways that we ask the questions. So I think about that. Well, the problems that we're experiencing now are still being perpetuated by the fact that we're doing graphs on television without explaining. We're talking about numbers without explaining. We're talking about things that are scary and uncomfortable. And we talk about in a one-on-one scary things without the explanations. Or when we do deliver explanations, they're jargony, right? We have to Google just to figure out what the language was. What did they say? I read, and I meant to write the quote down. I read something about this in communication, and it was basically a statement of saying we're going to communicate better. I mean, that's really what we're going to communicate better. And it was filled with jargon. And I just had to laugh. I thought, we can't even talk to each other about communicating better without filling it with jargon. You know, we're going to communicate ethically and regularly and all this. We're just going to do better. We're going to do better. So let me stop here and say, are there any questions? Because again, when expertise, and I hope maybe the correlation piece reminded you, expertise is wonderful. There's nothing better than probably some of these sessions that you've seen today when you're sitting here, and I've seen some of them. Oh, I learned this. I learned this. That's so cool. There's nothing like going to a session and learning something you can apply immediately, a hook that you can put it on. Yes, right? Yes. Price of admission. But as you begin this journey, as you go through this journey, remember that it's actually harder to be transparent. Yes, it's harder to be annotated. Actually, this is interesting. What we're seeing now is almost another set of data visualization literature coming out that annotations, some of the things that we have originally thought are not always viewed the way that we thought they may be. That annotations are always good on data visualizations, right? Clear annotations. And we're finding out that maybe not. That maybe explanatory titles are viewed by everyone. I don't know why we would think anything viewed by everyone would be the same, because again, we go back to those filters. That if we're trying to explain something in a title, does it not seem realistic that there are going to be individuals that aren't going to be comfortable with us making that explanation. And then what do you do to get around that and to point them to a chart or point them to the important elements of why you're creating it without them feeling like they're being manipulated? So we're running into new things, and it's almost as if we're starting to look at our communication and we're starting to break it down by our groups like we should, instead of saying this kind of communication is good, this kind of communication is bad. It has to be more nuanced. And I'm not sure that we know what the nuances are yet. Right? So I think, like I said, let me leave it there and see if there is a question. Yes, the subjective lens of processing information. I can see myself saying that to somebody, though. You're looking through your subjective lens. One of the things that we know is that people, as I said, you probably have an information orientation if you're in data science. If you have a more normative information, if you prefer to get your information from people that you know, even experts that you know, that can be very, very difficult when you encounter information from others. So we tend to surround ourselves with like people. Everybody likes to have their information confirmed. Everybody likes to be right. Nobody wants to be wrong. No one wants to be the stupid kid in the room, right? I mean, that sounds terrible, but that's how we feel when we're called out. So again, how do we bring that back? And can we with data science? Can you convince somebody with your variables, right, that you know what's next? And are we moving into a world that is more data science friendly or less? Or again, things that give me nightmares. Used to think that we were moving into a technology and non-technology world, right? And now I wonder if we're moving more into that world that is not just science, just the nature of our findings and our empirical findings and the nature of change. Things are changing so fast. People have to be mentally agile to manage it. And that the research mindset comes with mental agility, should at least. But though we do become enmeshed in our own paradigms. So and Gabriel, interestingly enough, my students I gave that assignment to for 67-year-old women, whether or not she should open her daycare, and none of them could find anything that would be helpful except news, like a local newspaper or something that said it's better or worse in our city, our county. They felt like that looking at the CDC or the information like on the Georgia website was not helpful in making an individual decision. I don't see any more comments. I'm looking through that. I thank you. Let's see. I like, yes, gathering as much data as possible and letting it speak for yourself. I think that's probably what some of what I'm getting at. And that is data can't speak for itself. Data don't speak for themselves. Data are not, data to be collected, it has to go through our lens. To be collected, we have to determine what to collect. Data can't speak for themselves. I don't think that's too controversial. Maybe it is. I think we, I mean, the whole idea of significance and meaningful and all of these things, these ideas that we are, have been enmeshed in for, years. Is it, if it's not significant, is it meaningful, or, where do we do it? But I think that's just it. Gathering as much data as possible, I think is a little bit of the fallacy that we fall into. Is that if I have more variables, that's what I was speaking of earlier. If I have more variables, I'll do better, right? But you're not going to have that variable of how that person is, or those people are, or certain groups are, based on their lived experience, going to view what you're delivering. You can't collect that as well. Now, I guess you could go back and collect their responses and do that, but it's still a one-way idea of communication, if you will. The whole idea that if we as data scientists pick, or even as a medical professional, if we do more, pick more, choose more, then this is being pushed out without the idea that there's somebody on the other end, that it's not just being put on, it's not just being pushed on, it's being filtered through, right? I mean, that person on that other side, it's not just that, oh, we're just hopping over this. They're filtering it through, and they're coming up with what they think how that information is, right? It's that old game of telephone where things go around the room. So I don't know that data can speak for themselves. I think that's the issue. From the very time that we formulate our question, we've started setting those parameters, right? And I'll go back to, I had the shoulder issue. Someone comes in and says, my shoulder hurts, right? Then you can't go into the doctor each time. Right, right, right. And we can't destroy our lens. But how often are we? Yeah, but I think we're being very harsh about our lens these days. I don't think we're thinking so much about our lens as being more and more problematic because of expertise. And I'm not sure that we are talking as much as we should about why that lens makes it difficult for us to communicate. I mean, physicians have been aware of this and are trying to get better, but it's more than someone just holding your hand or delivering something in more of a voice. So I wasn't being dismissive. I think you're right. We do need to collect the data in the lens, but I also think the fact that we're doing the data collection and we're the ones with the lens and we're the ones with this makes it very, very difficult to remember. So I would say when we're Googling it, that puts us as the patient, right? That puts us as on the other side. And if you can think about how helpless and frustrated you can feel when you can't find the information that you know must exist out there because your physician said it, especially if your physician said jargony or something like that. And you're like, wait, I can find this, but you can't find the article. You can't find the research. If you can remember how that side of it feels, then maybe you can think about how, if you go into a room and you're presenting to non-analysts, how they might feel when you're presenting your information, if that helps. But I am curious about the, the AI and lifting paradigms. You're gonna have to think about that one. Any other questions? I'm looking to see. I'm still laughing. We can't believe everything we see on the computer. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think I'm reading the two comments. I think it's yeah, I think it is. I think it's very, very difficult. And I think again, when looking at the even that stuff on communication of data and health data or any data really, even we're still in more of an infancy than perhaps we thought we were in looking at this. And if you don't believe me, look at what's happening. You know, I mean, you would think since 1918 we would have a little bit of difference in how we're communicating about a pandemic, and we're not. We're seeing the same type of patterns with people because people, psychology doesn't change that much. People have filters. People view things. People believe what family members say. People, whether it was on Facebook or if it was, across the fence. So again, I think that in looking at this, step away from your data science and flip over to the person and try to remember as you go along your data science journey and become more and more and more and more proficient, and you will, everybody does, right? We hope as you grow in that data science journey, that it really is harder to see that other side. Well, I appreciate, thank you so much for your attention. I am on LinkedIn. I will be glad to chat with anybody that would like to talk about this because, like I said, it keeps me up at night. I absolutely. Thank you. I want to put that's a tattoo, taking comfort in chaos. You have to be comfortable with ambiguity. And that can be very, 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 very hard. Yes. Comfort and ambiguity and realizing we don't have necessarily the answer, or if we have the answer, it'll change tomorrow. And perhaps maybe that's what we need to communicate better too, as data scientists, that, yeah, this is what we know now, but it could change. So again, I appreciate your attention. Thank you so much. I am on LinkedIn. I can also be found at Kallina, Let me write this, W. Kallina at Agnes Scott. And if I can get my own name right. And always fun to talk about this, as well as bias. Data visualization is a good way of communication. Again, if you're interested in any of this, I'll be glad to discuss with you. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate your input, and have a great day.